Hi there, it's Jonny Miller from Point Blank Online Music School, back once more to show you some cool tricks with Ableton Live 8 and sounds, samples and loops from clickproduce.com. Today I'm going to show you how to make a really cool lead synth sound using drum sounds and the Resonators device in Ableton Live. It's quite a cool little trick. Gives you lots of options when you're building your tunes. And to demonstrate this, I'm going to use some sounds and samples and loops from Tech House Planet, made by Audio Tent. And this is a really cool pack. Mainly construction kits. We've got 10 construction kits in here. We've also got, of course, a folder for Apple loops, Rex files if you use Reason. I'm just going to use the WAV files for now. And the 10 construction kits are essentially 10 tracks, 10 little loops that are broken down into their basic parts: drums, percussion, hi-hats, kicks, synths, etc. 10 tracks all separated off into their separate main root note. So I've used a couple of samples in the root note of C for this track. We've also got some drum hits in here, and these are the sounds that I'm going to use to create a lead sound, because we don't actually have in this pack any lead synth single notes. But we do have, though, some really nice synth and bass loops. And again, broken down into their root notes. Got quite a few in here to choose from. And I've made up a little sketch in Session View here. Let's just show you what I have made up of some of the different loops, some of the different drum loops, a bass loop and a synth loop. So at the moment, these are my drums. And I'm actually really impressed with the sound quality of these sounds. Audio Tent have put together a really nice little pack here. Drum sound nice and polished, and I've brought in on top just a little bass riff, just again another loop, and I've added to that a synth riff, again in the root note of C. Now this is a much longer sample, and I like the rest of it, but I just like this idea of having a short loop. And in minimal tech and a lot of other techno styles, you tend to have quite short repetitive loops. So I've gone for a 2-beat loop here, just literally working around the beginning of this synth loop. I've also added in, I've worked on the decay of each sample as well within the loop, just using the transient loop mode and the loop envelope. And we did a tutorial on that a couple of weeks ago. So head back into the vaults and watch that tutorial to see how I did that. I also just took another portion of the loop and made a little variation, just so I've got something to use later on in the track, just to change things up. So in Session View I can just switch between those two. Okay, so that's the setup for the set. On this track here I've added in a simpler device, which I'm going to load some snare sounds into, and I'm going to process those sounds using the Resonators device here. I'm going to show you a couple of key presets and little tricks on how to subtly change the effect that Resonator has on the sounds to create a lead synth part. I'm going to go back into Tech House Planet drum hits, claps and snares, and just take one of these snare sounds. This one I'll do, number 12. I'm just going to throw it into the simpler device I've got set up here on track number 7. Now I'm going to bring Resonator in and affect the signal coming from this simpler device. But firstly, I'm just going to draw in into a single MIDI clip some snare hits, and I'm going to keep it quite vague for now. I can always add to this later on and just change the pattern of these snares later on. Okay, let's bring Resonators in now, and first thing I'm going to do is select one of the presets, and there's a few choice ones to look for here. If I just hit the hot swap button, this will take me straight into Live's browser and into the Resonators folder. I'm just going to pick the Berlin preset for now, and I'm going to put the Resonators wet dry value on 100% wet. So what Resonator is doing here is taking the signal from simpler, in this case a snare sound, and it's adding, with each one of these 5 resonators, it's adding tonal qualities to the sound. Now the first resonator determines the main pitch. So at the moment it's set to G. If I just click on the little center arrow, that will take me up to C. And that means now that the Resonator's effect is in key with the bass. And all the other musical elements of my track that I've added so far, because they all have the root note of C. Now, all the Resonator's functions here we can tune. We can change, for instance, the decay to get a slightly tighter sound. Let's give that a bit more gain. Width gives us a mono effect. So I'm just going to bring that down a bit as well, just so we've got slightly more centered sound. We've also got a filter too, which can affect the incoming signal. We could set that up maybe to a band pass. Really home in on certain frequencies coming from that snare. Let's give that a tiny bit more volume. Also just going to turn up simpler as well, so we get a little bit more out of simpler, get a slightly stronger signal coming into the Resonator's device. Okay, going to put the synth back on 6. I'm just going to move these notes around a little bit till I'm happy with the rhythm. That's quite nice. So from here I could use clip envelopes to change the value of this note parameter here, to get slightly different melody patterns coming out of Resonators. And now I've just changed that parameter actually on the device. It's open for me now in clip envelopes, ready to go. So let's just draw in some automation here inside clip envelopes. And I'm just going to tune these last 2 notes here, see how this sounds. And if I keep the envelope open like that, that's nice. I've got a nice little riff going now on that Resonator lead. And again, the whole time, all that's happening here is it's a snare sound playing, but Resonators is giving us that tonal quality and changing it into a lead synth. We can open up the decay. If the track was building up to some kind of crescendo, we can bring it down in other certain sections. So we can get quite a lot out of this effect. Now lastly, I'm just going to show you a way that you can use the functions of Simpler to change the incoming signal. Let's just move the start and end points of this sample to catch some of the different regions of audio in this sample and see what we get. So if I just move the start point in, you can hear it's drastically changing the effect, because I've lost now this little transient peak at the beginning of the snare. If it gets too quiet, I can just turn it up. Let's maybe bring that start point in and change the end point now. Kind of tighten that up. That's really nice. Need to turn the volume down a bit though. Anyway, you can learn loads of cool stuff like this at pointblankonline.net, and I'll be back once more again next week to show you some cool stuff with Ableton Live 8 and sounds and samples from clickproduce.com. Peace.